Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to come out politics. So there was a politically charged by-election in Caerphilly, Wales yesterday. Once a strong Labour seat, now gone to Plaid. Though even for Labour supporters, that is a blessing because Reform UK were polling to win the seat. So against the polling odds, how did Plaid beat Reform? How did they do it so comfortably? Also, what are the conclusions we can draw for the wider picture? And what are the conclusions some may draw, which will be dead wrong? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So the pre-election polling, first of all. Now, I will point out that the poll was conducted a couple of weeks ago. And so there was no accounting for that late surge in tactical voting, which you could get from a poll closer to the election itself. But it's a by-election. It's not a full national election. So nobody's going to throw money at doing regular polling all the way up to the polling date itself. And the reason the end result was very different to the polling, it's not a reflection on the pollster surveyation, just the timing. There was a lot of anti-reform tactical voting. Even Plaid's leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth, acknowledged that Labour supporters voted Plaid to stop reform, which is encouraging, even for a Labour supporter like me. But anyway, the polling had Reform win with 42% of the vote, Plaid in second place with 38%, Labour a very distant third on like 12%. We'll come to why that is in a moment because it's more complicated than some will think. Now, the actual results for the three main parties were Plaid won with 47% of the vote, Reform in second with 36%, Labour third on 11%. So very different to the polling, and the difference was down to a couple of things. First, a surge in increased participation. Turnout was much higher than expected, and this will be because locals were determined not to elect a man who pushes racist propaganda and once worked as an assistant for a Russian agent in the form of Nathan Gill. Second, tactical voting. That Labour's result was a little bit lower than polled, but Plaid's was much, much higher. That was due not just to the surge in participation, but that was crucial, but also people who would have wanted Labour to win or the Greens to win because their vote went down as well, or other parties basically realising this is a contest between Reform and Plaid, and they voted tactically to stop Reform. So what can we read from this? Well, the first and most positive takeaway is Reform UK can unite tactical voting ahead of them. It wasn't just Labour supporters voting Plaid. There were Green supporters, there were others as well, because they didn't want Reform UK. Now, I wouldn't ordinarily try to extrapolate from one town in Wales to the whole of Britain, but this is consistent with general polling as well. Reform UK are leading the polls in Britain. There's no doubt about that. However, although that technically means they are the public's favourite party, they are also polling consistently as most other people's least favourite party. So you've got a large minority who want to give them a chance at power, but you've got many others who will vote for almost anyone else to stop them. That is what happened yesterday. Labour supporters will not have lightly voted for a rival in what had been a strong Labour area. Maybe Green voters, it would have been a bit easier because they have never won and they were never likely to win. Labour are used to winning there. So it would have been a big thing for them to vote for Plaid, who are their fiercest rivals in Wales. And they did it because they were being practical. There's also something else to point out. It's normally unusual to see such strong tactical voting in a by-election. People don't usually consider by-elections to be important because it's not going to change the government. This is why Reform have done so well in local council elections, because a lot of people don't think local council elections are all that important. Well, someone's still going to collect the bins, aren't they? Are they? But they may not make the transition to national power because people take those elections more seriously. But this by-election was actually very important. The balance of power in the Welsh Parliament is so tight that actually it did make a difference. If Reform had won it, that would have sunk Labour's budget ahead of next year's national elections. As it is, Labour losing the seat still puts it in jeopardy, but Plaid have a long history of working with Welsh Labour, so there's a good chance that although they'll be jostling with one another, they'll agree something. Being honest, it's hard to find much of a difference between Labour and Plaid policy-wise, other than, of course, Labour want a united Britain, Plaid want an independent Wales. It's not like even the SNP and Scottish Labour, where, yes, they've got some core policies similar, but they've also got very real differences as well. And this is where we also have to be careful reading too much into the results. There are definitely conclusions, But there are also things that are very different in Wales. In Wales, Labour have been in power since, well, basically forever. Labour's fall is down to three main factors. First, yes, there's no getting away from the fact most people still don't see Labour nationally revitalising the country. A combination of impatience from voters and poor communications and missteps from UK Labour is damaging the Labour brand everywhere. But second, Welsh Labour have personally been in power for a long time. They are the incumbents. In Britain, sort of more widely, Labour have only just come to power a bit over a year ago. The Tories were in power before then. In Wales, no, Labour have been in power for a long time. They are the incumbent government. And there's a cost of living crisis, which is really biting. As we've seen from elections all over the world since the post-2022 inflation, incumbents are mostly doing badly these days. They're mostly losing. Well, Labour are the incumbents in Wales. Third, Welsh Labour were also the architects of their own personal destruction. Their previous leader shit the bed with dodgy donations, which he took far too long to deal with. They have been arguing about closing libraries, but it's Welsh Labour councils who are closing them. And their campaign was just basically pants in general. Like this was one of their campaign posts yesterday. Now, there were other more sensible ones, although I didn't think any of them were any good. But this attempt at humour when they were on for a hiding was either very badly advised, or maybe Labour strategists knew the writing was on the wall and were actually kind of hoping people voted Plaid to beat reform, right? Because, bear in mind, you think to yourself from Welsh Labour's point of view, did it really matter if they're going to lose the seat? It actually does. They can work much more productively with Plaid than with Reform. Reform will sink the budget just for the hell of it, right? Because they feed off chaos. Then it's also worth bearing in mind that because Plaid and Welsh Labour are very similar in most of their policies, or most of the policies voters are interested in, the big difference obviously is whether Wales should be part of the UK or not. What the voters in Caerphilly were effectively presented with was the same boon Reform UK have nationally. Nationally, Reform UK are on the right wing, they're Tories without the Tory record, and on the left, they're like Labour without the Labour record, even though the Labour record, I will say, is very good. But not in people's minds. In Wales, voters who aren't interested in Welsh independence can look at Plaid as like Labour, because they've worked very closely with each other. There's not a lot of difference between their policies. So they're like Labour, but without the stench of failure. They didn't have to swing from one party to a very different party, as often happens nationally in the UK. We swing from Labour to the Conservatives. You don't have that massive swing. It's just like a slight bit like doing the time warp. It's just a step to the left. This is why the next Welsh government is likely to be led by Plaid after next May, albeit not with a majority. And because it will be fully PR elections, should be no danger of Reform getting anywhere near power by winning a majority somehow on like 30% of the vote. If they get 30% of the vote, they'll get 30% of the seats. It will still be, the government is likely to be an alliance of Plaid and Welsh Labour, just like it is now, but with the balance of power the other way around. We'll have to see how the numbers fall exactly. The same won't be true nationally at the next election. A lot of people are going to be voting in an election where it's between two very different parties and with first past the post. This means that Labour stand a good chance of taking advantage of anti-reform sentiment. Remember, in a first past the post system, even if Reform are the preferred party, which I, again, don't think they necessarily will be by 2029, but if they are, if more people would vote to keep them out than to elect them, they'll lose. And Labour nationally will be more popular in 2029 than now. They won't be asking people to vote for them as begrudgingly as they'd have to now, even if their comms gets no better. The improvements which people can't see now will be visible in the next couple of years. So like I keep saying, there are headwinds for Reform UK that people just aren't talking about, but they're still there. Even if Reform are still technically the most popular party at the next general election, something I still think is a massive doubt, all it takes is for more people to want to keep them out than to want to put them in, and they will drop from polling first to second in seat after seat after seat around the country. Reform's strategy of garnering enough support to technically win a majority, but pissing everyone else off could bite them on the arse. Remember, polling a couple of weeks ago in Caerphilly showed that Reform were ahead. So this isn't like, oh, this is just different in Caerphilly. No. They were ahead. That meant if people could vote as they wanted to vote, Reform were going to win, right? But as it got closer, people were starting to think about it, the consequences, and they went, we don't want reform. So you had a switch from parties like Labour and the Greens to Plaid, as well as more people turn out who weren't going to turn out to vote at all, just to stop Reform UK, right? And that is something that we can map across the whole of Britain. Finally, I'll say one more thing about Welsh Labour specifically. They have a massive problem that is not shared by Labour in England. The things I say will show Labour are delivering nationally, like better access to the NHS, better housing, best start centres, cheaper energy, cleaner water. These are essentially economic policies and are therefore devolved. Starmer's policies will be seen in concrete in England. Where they'll manifest themselves in Wales will be through more funding for the Welsh Parliament, who will then decide how to spend it in Wales. I noticed that Plaid leader Run ap Iorwerth announced some extra spending during the campaign, but he didn't say he'd be cutting any spending to pay for it. So how did that work? When asked, he said it's going to come from the extra money Wales is getting in the next few years. Well, where's that money coming from? It's UK Labour who have boosted public spending in last year's budget, which means that Welsh and Scottish parliaments will be getting a proportional increase in their funding. But the voters won't see that. They will only see what's done with the money. And if Plaid are in charge once this money starts rolling in, as is almost certain, Labour in Wales will only be able to get credit by pointing it out. In other words, throughout the whole of Britain, Labour's poor comms is a problem for everyone. It's a problem for like UK Labour, for Welsh Labour, for Scottish Labour. But in England, there will be concrete signs of improvements, which will be undeniably Labour as well. So even if their comms is terrible, people will notice some things. In Wales and Scotland, the Labour parties there are going to need their comms game to improve in order to highlight it, because they're going to have to show the flow of money coming from Labour in Westminster. They're going to have to highlight that the public services are improving due to Labour providing more funding from London. And Labour's comms is dire. Not just Downing Street's operation, Welsh Labour's as well. Speaking personally, I hope Scottish Labour have things under better control. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.